It is 2 in the morning, and your yard is completely dark. The porch light is off. The street lamp at the corner is throwing a faint amber wash over the sidewalk, but nothing reaches the back lawn. Nothing reaches the oak tree at the edge of your property, or the weedy strip of ground along the fence where the voles have been tunneling all autumn. To you, if you stepped outside right now, it would be formless. Shadow inside shadow. You would stand on your back step and see nothing essentially. A barred owl is sitting in that oak. It has been sitting there for 11 minutes. It is not waiting for its eyes to adjust. They already have, within seconds of its landing. It is not straining to see. It is watching with a clarity and precision that no instrument you own in your house can match. The exact strip of ground along your fence where a meadow vole last moved 40 seconds ago. It can see the depression the vole left in the frost-flattened grass. It can see the direction the trail is moving, and it is calculating, with a brain that has been tuned to this specific problem for 60 million years, the geometry of a strike. Most people imagine owl vision as a kind of enhanced version of human night vision. Darker, sharper, maybe greenish at the edges, like something out of a military documentary. But that is not remotely what is happening inside that owl's head. What is happening is something far more constructed, far more layered, and in certain respects, far stranger than anything your own visual system has ever done or will ever do. Welcome back to the hidden mind of birds. Stay with us until the end, because the final thing we cover, the way an owl can make a perfect strike in conditions of absolute zero light with no visual input whatsoever, is the thing that, once you understand it, will change what you feel when you hear one calling in your yard at night. Let us start with the eye itself, because the eye is where the story begins and where most people's assumptions fall apart. You have probably heard that owls have large eyes. What you may not know is the specific scale of what large means here. A great horned owl's eyes are roughly the same size as a human adult size. In a bird whose skull you could hold in one hand, if your eyes were proportionally as large as an owl's, they would be the size of oranges. They would not fit in the front of your face. They would extend back nearly to your ears. The reason for this is photon collection. Every visual system, whether it belongs to a vole or an owl, or to you, runs on the same fundamental currency, light. Specifically, the photons that enter the eye and strike the photoreceptor cells at the back of the retina. A larger eye, all else being equal, collects more photons. It gathers more light from the same dark environment, and in the business of hunting at night, more photons means more information, which means more kills, which means survival. But the size of the eye is only the beginning. The architecture inside is what makes the owl's vision something categorically different from your own. Your retina contains 2 types of photoreceptors, cones and rods. Cones handle color and fine detail in bright light. Rods handle low-light vision. Humans have roughly 20 rod cells for every cone cell, a ratio shaped by the fact that we are a daylight species who occasionally had to navigate the dark. An owl's retina is almost entirely rods. The ratio in a great horned owl runs closer to 30 rods to every single cone. The owl has, in effect, traded its color resolution and fine detailed daylight vision for an extraordinary sensitivity to light at the lowest possible levels. What this means practically is that an owl's retina can register the visual signal produced by a single photon, one particle of light. Under conditions where the human visual system has gone functionally blind, where you are looking at what your brain registers as pure black, an owl is still receiving enough light to form a coherent image of the world. There is something worth sitting with in that. You step outside at 2 in the morning and see nothing. The owl in your oak is watching a world. But here's where it gets stranger. Stay with me, because this is the part that changes the way you think about what an owl actually is. Those enormous eyes do not move, not even a little. An owl's eyes are not spherical the way yours are. They are tubular, elongated cylinders locked into the skull by a structure called a sclerotic ring. a series of tiny interlocking bones that hold the eye rigid in its socket. If an owl wants to look left, it cannot slide its eyes left the way you can. It has to move its entire head. This is why you have seen owls rotate their heads at angles that seem to defy anatomy up to 270 degrees in either direction, and why that motion looks so different from the casual eye flick of a robin or a sparrow. The owl has no choice. The head is the only mechanism it has for redirecting its gaze. What it loses in eye mobility, though, it more than recovers in something else: binocular overlap. Because both eyes are positioned on the front of the face, forward-facing, like yours, unlike nearly every other bird, whose eyes sit on the sides of the skull, an owl has an enormous zone of overlapping binocular vision. About 70 degrees of its visual field is seen by both eyes simultaneously, and binocular vision, the comparison of two slightly different images of the same scene from two slightly different angles, is exactly what the brain uses to calculate depth, to know not just what is out there, but how far away it is, and precisely where in three-dimensional space it sits. Research from Cambridge University confirms that the depth resolution in an owl's binocular field is extraordinary, calibrated, specifically, to the distances involved in a hunting strike, not the distances you use when you are driving a car or scanning a skyline. The distances of the last 3 feet, the lunge, the moment of contact. The owl's visual system is tuned at the finest level to the geometry of killing at close range in the dark. The combination of maximum light sensitivity, forward-facing eyes, locked gaze requiring full head rotation produces a visual experience that does not have a good analogy in human terms. You would have to imagine wearing cameras with enormous lenses, mounted rigidly to a helmet you could not remove, giving you a stunning depth-resolved image of whatever was directly in front of you, while behind you was a near-complete blank that you could only address by turning your whole body. It would be disorienting. For the owl, it is simply the shape of the world. Now let us talk about what the owl does when even its extraordinary eyes run out of information. This is the part that most people do not know, and it is the most important part. There are nights, genuinely dark nights, with heavy cloud cover and no moon and no ambient light, when even an owl's retina, for all its photon-gathering power, cannot produce a clear enough image to strike accurately. The light is simply not there, and yet, in these conditions, the barn owl in particular continues to hunt, continues to strike, with accuracy rates that, documented by researchers at the University of Edinburgh, approach 100% even in conditions of total, measurable darkness. The owl's not using its eyes, it is using its ears. A barn owl possesses the most precisely calibrated hearing of any animal ever tested. Not just any bird, any animal. Its ears are positioned asymmetrically on its skull, one slightly higher than the other, one slightly more forward. This asymmetry is not an accident or an imperfection. It is an engineering solution to a three-dimensional problem. Sound arrives at one ear a fraction of a millisecond before the other. The owl's auditory cortex, which, in a barn owl, is proportionally larger than the auditory cortex of any other bird, processes that microsecond difference and uses it to calculate the precise vertical location of the sound source. Most animals with 2 ears can localize sound horizontally. The barn owl can localize it in 3 dimensions: latitude, longitude, and elevation, from sound alone, in complete darkness. And then there is the face. That heart-shaped disc of feathers you see on a barn owl, the one that makes its face look almost human, almost eerie, is not decorative. It is a parabolic reflector, a satellite dish made of feathers. The specialized feathers of the facial disc funnel sound inward toward the ear openings with an efficiency that amplifies the incoming acoustic signal by a factor of 10 compared to what the bare skull would receive. The barn owl is wearing a hearing aid built into its face, tuned specifically to the frequency range of a small rodent moving through dry grass, roughly 3 to 9 kilohertz. the exact band in which the rustle of a mouse or vole is loudest. What this means for your yard is this: on the darkest night of the year, with no moon and no stars and no porch light anywhere on the street, if a meadow vole takes 3 steps in the weedy strip along your fence, the barn owl, perched 40 feet away, knows the precise coordinates of that animal in 3-dimensional space. It knows how far away it is. It knows how high off the ground it is. It knows which direction it is moving, from sound alone, from 3 steps, and then it drops. The flight itself deserves its own moment, because the flight is the final piece of what makes the owl something genuinely unlike any other predator in your yard. You know the sound a pigeon makes when it takes off, that loud, percussive clap of wings. You know the sound a crow makes banking through the trees. Almost every bird you have ever watched fly produces sound when it flies, not because they are careless, but because feathers moving through air at speed generate turbulence, and turbulence generates noise. And for most birds, that noise is simply an acceptable cost of flight. An owl's wings are silent. Not quieter, silent. The leading edge of an owl's primary feathers, the outermost flight feathers, is serrated with a comb-like fringe of microfilaments that breaks up the turbulent airflow before it can become acoustic. The trailing edge has a soft, frayed velvet that absorbs the remaining microturbulence. The upper surface of the wing is covered in a downy layer, so soft it damps any remaining vibration before it can radiate outward as sound. Researchers at Lehigh University, who have studied owl flight acoustics, found that a great horned owl in active flight generates sound levels that are, at the distances relevant to prey, essentially inaudible. The vole under the snow has no acoustic warning. There is no whoosh of wings. There is no shadow passing over, because it is dark. There is simply nothing, and then there are talons. The owl does not announce itself. It arrives. Herds something in that which goes beyond the biology. Something about the way this particular creature has been shaped by time into a kind of silence that is itself a form of presence, enormous, patient, hovering at the edge of what you can perceive, that lands differently once you understand all the mechanisms behind it. Come back to your yard, 2 in the morning. The oak at the edge of your property, the frost-flattened grass along the fence, the amber wash of the street lamp that does not reach any of it. You thought you were looking at darkness. You were looking at the interior of a hunting ground that has been operating in your yard, probably for years, without your knowledge or participation. The barred owl was not visiting. It has a territory that encompasses your block and 3 others, and it works that territory on a rotation so consistent that researchers tracking barn owls in suburban landscapes, including work published through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, have found that individual owls return to the same birch trees on the same nights at roughly the same hours, week after week, across entire seasons. The oak in your yard is on a list. You just did not know the list existed. What you were looking at, in that darkness you took for empty, was a creature that sees a world your eyes cannot enter, hears coordinates your brain cannot compute, flies in a silence your ears cannot catch, and has been doing all of this in your specific yard, on your specific street, longer than you have lived there. There is no way to feel that fully and not be moved by it. Not by awe exactly, by something quieter. The recognition that the night your yard disappears into every evening is nothing. It is another world, fully inhabited, running its own logic, folding up at dawn like a room you never knew was there. Tell me in the comments, have you ever heard an owl calling from your yard at night, or seen one sitting somewhere and watching you? Tell me where you were and what it felt like. I want to know. I read everyone. I will see you in the next one.